Welcome back. So here we're going to talk together. And as always, this is a highly experiential conversation. As we chat, I encourage you to notice what's moving in your body, in your own sense on the inside, what you're feeling and experiencing. And I want to transition to say, here's our solution. Very succinctly, here is the solution. And I go back to noting that psychological measures for me hit a certain level. Consciousness interventions, consciousness methods went to the level in which I could start to work with those existential uncertainties, those fears that were really dormant within me, but my son's death brought them forward in a new way. And the solution is to enter these expanded states of consciousness. You may call them a variety of different terms, whether they're non-ordinary states, unordinary states. Altered states can create a sense of discomfort within and many of us because we have our own associations with what it would mean to be in an altered state. Often it can be called a hypnagogic state in between sleep and wake. Trance states are another word. I'm giving you the whole array of options here, and you can decide which term really resonates for you. I use expanded states because they are intended to be in everyday life. If anything, it is expanding our purview for what we are taking in the world. It is an expanded perception in terms of space and time and self. And those three components particularly is what starts to shift our relationship with those three layers that we just spoke about. Those three layers of uncertainty and fear that are dormant within us. And I tell you, they are coming to the surface right now in our world in a very overt way. So when we work with expanded states, especially through the method I've developed, GAZE, which is a natural induction method to enter an expanded state in that it is replicable, you can do it as many times as you wish, it is safe in terms of your capacity to titrate your experience, to adjust it based on what's right for you, and it is accessible in terms of the methods that it uses, the techniques, have very few contraindications for most people. In other words, any of us can engage in these expanded states. So when we're in an expanded state of consciousness, first of all, we start to disorient to ourself. And what happens is the bounds of the self start to dissolve. In other words, that rigid sense of self starts to soften. And I want to point to science here that show that in terms of neuroscience, ego dissolution, so when your ego starts to dissolve, it reduces our fear-based patterns. And this especially comes from Johns Hopkins University in terms of the reduction of death anxiety even after one session. And about 80% of participants experienced that sense of reduction of their own fear of death. On a one level, consider what would it be like to live without being afraid of your own death, of your own demise, which will happen at any point in time. Notice the freedom that comes from being able to live in such a present moment way in which you are no longer running or trying to escape the inevitable that one day each of us will die. That's what happens when we start to loosen the bounds of the sense of self and our own need to preserve the self. And that does not mean that you will wish your death, in no way, but it frees you from trying to run from it and to always choose patterns and ways of being that are attempting to sidestep this reality. Finally, the second layer I want to talk about is this interconnection with others. So in expanded states, we start to notice where, again, that sense of self starts to dissolve, and we are interconnected with everyone and everything. Now, this always gets a little weird because many of us are like, I don't know if I really want to be connected, especially with someone who you perhaps just do not appreciate or enjoy, or that there's difficulty or dynamics, or especially in our current climate, someone that you absolutely disagree with. And not just on a mental level, really in a whole-bodied way in which another person's existence is threatening your own. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But when we're in expanded states, it brings forward that deep sense of connection with others that breaks the illusion of isolation. It breaks the illusion that you are alone. And that's that second layer that we just spoke about, where when you feel like you are absolutely alone in the world, it creates a sense of terror on the inside. When we are in these expanded states, we often encounter what's called a mystical experience. And in that way, going back to the St. John Hopkins research and their work, participants generally experience greater empathy and a reduced fear of rejection. And think about how often rejection drives us for acceptance and to find our place in the world. In addition, when we are in expanded states, we often have up to a 30% increase in social bonding in terms of neurotransmitters like oxytocin, and that reduces our fear of abandonment. Notice even in your body right now what it might be like to live authentically, openly, in a very real and transparent way with healthy boundaries in the world where you are no longer fearing others and their rejection or abandonment of you, in which you experience an interconnection with them, in which the other is no longer separate from you and you are no longer holding everyone and everything, perhaps at arm's length or from even a natural place of resistance. And this leads us to our third layer. We talked about that fear of others, right? That fear of what we may do or what others may do to us that gets at that layer of feeling like we need to hold ourselves separate. So at that collective layer, in these experiences, expanded states, we often encounter what's called the numinous. And in terms of empirical research, this is the experience that most people have, up to 80% have, in an expanded state of consciousness. The direct experience of the numinous is that feeling of being supported by something greater than us. And that sense of greatness can often be, of course, personified in the concept of God or the universe or the divine. But it's a sense of a ground of being that is bigger than us coming in and supporting us. And I want you to notice right now, what would it be like to walk through life feeling like you have all the support you need at your fingertips at all times, at a moment's notice? Amazing, right? So what we know is when we are in these numinous experiences, it solves that sense of collective fear that drives us, that fear of others and what they may do to us or what we may do to them if we are truly honest about our own abilities. And we know again from science, especially looking at the brain scans of monks in deep trance states, it shows reduced amygdala activity, less fear, greater emotional stability. In particular, we know that coming from these expanded states, we often actually have an activation of the prefrontal cortex, especially after an expanded state experience, which is what's responsible for rational thought and emotional regulation. It essentially thickens over time, so it increases our resilience to actually encounter external fear, that especially that fear of others or fear of what's happening in the world right now, and that stimuli without collapsing or going into chaos within. So I'm going to offer one more step in our process, and with that comes an invitation to join me for this upcoming webinar. Because you may be saying, okay, I'm in. I want to experience an expanded state, but I do not know how, or perhaps I don't have the access or the resources to do so. So this is a free offer. I invite you to come. I encourage you to show up live, because if you show up live, you will receive the very direct transmission in terms of a consciousness level to support your process. But this upcoming free webinar is an opportunity for you to experience the gaze method that I've developed. It is a natural way to enter expanded states, to transmute fear on those 3 levels that we just spoke about, to experience some of those outcomes that I just referenced in terms of the numinous, interconnection with others, and the dissolving of the self. This is a safe way for you to enter an expanded state without any contraindications. It includes a collection of methods that I have pulled intentionally that have, again, the safest and the most replicable outcomes for the most people on any given moment. So in other words, it's made for you. And we know in terms of what's happening that when we shift essentially the wave states in our brains, it can move us into heightened awareness. When we're in that heightened, expanded awareness, you encounter really a facet of yourself, a deeper, wiser place within that you long for. It's what all of us are motivated by. We want to access that part of ourself that we may have forgotten is there, but we know it's yearning and calling to us just beneath the surface. So very distinctly, come and join me. Join me for this free webinar. The information is right there for you if you scroll down. There's 3 conscious strategies that I want to teach you for these 3 levels of transformation to create lasting stability in overwhelming change. In addition to the 3 strategies I'll teach you, which are very replicable and easy to master, we'll enter an expanded state using the gaze method, one facet of the gaze method, so that you can just get a taste of what it's like. I invite you to take a risk with me. I invite you to actually take a moment and to feel your heart and notice that there may be a calling to you right now that's saying, I want to be different. I want to feel different, not just at one level, but at a substance level as we navigate this unprecedented moment of change. I want to be part of this great unraveling in a way that does not contribute to growing chaos, but actually charts a way toward a new reality. And I'm here to say to you that we will not do this only from our rational mind, because our rational mind, which is a beautiful, necessary tool, is wired for self-preservation, is wired to perceive us and them, is wired to know that at any point in time, someone or something may threaten us. And if you want to transcend that natural inclination within you and to find a new way, this webinar is your opportunity to take a step, to experience an expanded state in a safe way, and to notice how there is a deeper, wiser resilience within you, ready to come to the surface, ready to give you the tools, the techniques, but also the state of being to support you in a changing world.